Hello. So in this Mad Hatter Day 2024 video, we're going to talk about the 1999 film version of Alice in Wonderland directed by Nick Willing. Now this is a pretty star-studded cast in this. We've got people like Whoopi Goldberg, Martin Short, Christopher Lloyd, Peter Ustinov, Gene Wilder. Pete Postlethwaite. We've got just these amazing stars. Really, really big people. The movie itself, it's a fairly standard telling of Alice in Wonderland, right? We've got your major stories that everybody knows. The Mad Hatter and March Hare's tea party with the Dormouse. The Red Queen, or the Queen of Hearts, Who Wants to Behead Everybody, The Walrus and the Carpenter, narrated by Tweedledum and Tweedledee. We got all the big ones, the Cheshire Cat, etc. All that stuff. Everything you want in an Alice in Wonderland is in the Nick Willing film. So, what makes it unique? What makes it interesting? Well, there's a couple of things that I would talk about. First is the special effects. This is 1999, so by the standards of 1999, the special effects were pretty good. By the standards of 2024, not as amazing. There's some things that are pretty good, right? So, like the White Rabbit, for instance, is CGI'd as this kind of clockwork rabbit who's very robotic, very sort of jerky in his motions, and as he moves around, you generally get this sort of mechanized clockwork sound that goes with his movements, which is kind of thematically interesting considering that he's always looking at his watch and declaring that he's late. So the idea that the White Rabbit himself is a clockwork character is really kind of cool. Some of the CGI sort of transitions between scenes, changes in sizes, things like that, do work really, really well. Some of them don't quite work as well. Some of them, again, are very dated. They look very late 90s, and that's totally fine. It's a film of its time, and I can't fault it for that. So that's one element. The other element that I think is interesting about this particular film is what they do with the Bildungsroman aspect, right? Bildungsroman is a fancy English professor way of saying a coming-of-age story. So Alice in Wonderland, of course, is a coming-of-age story. It is about Alice confronting her fears, journeying through this space of bizarreness, of sort of upside-down logic, of nonsense, and coming out the other side, and in some way being a stronger, more mature adult person for it. Good enough, right? So, in Willings' film, they have a particular focus to the Bildungsroman, which is that Alice's parents want her to perform the song Cherry Ripe, written by Robert Herrick, one of the Cavalier poets of the English Civil War era, at their garden party in front of all their guests. And Alice really does not want to do it. She does not want to sing in front of people. And so, throughout her adventures in Wonderland, she's continually being asked to perform, right? The caterpillar asks her to perform, to recite "You Are Old, Father William." Of course, this is a famous one. We get this in a lot. The Mad Hatter and the March Hare ask her to tell them a story or sing them a song, and they sing songs. This is a musical version. That's, I guess, worth mentioning. The characters are constantly singing to Alice, or about themselves, about the world that they know, the world that they inhabit, etc., etc. Um, and they're constantly exhorting Alice to perform in some way. And out of a combination of not being able to remember the words of poems or songs and not being willing to perform in front of others, Alice is consistently reluctant. I think almost in a way, we get kind of the thesis of this movie, to the extent that there is a thesis, with the caterpillar. Because he asks Alice to recite, and she says, she says that she doesn't remember, she says that she's afraid, and he says, "You mustn't be afraid. That's worse than not remembering." And that's kind of the thesis of this film, in a way. The thing that it ultimately wants to prove is that Alice does not need to be afraid. She should not be afraid to perform in front of others. But at the end of the film, when she gets back out of Wonderland, I'm going to talk more about that in just a second, because that's also kind of an interesting element of this film. When she gets back out of Wonderland, she does agree to sing, but she decides not to sing Cherry Ripe. Bad luck, Robert Herrick. This film may have turned some people off of your poetry. I apologize if that happened, because you're actually quite a good poet. But she decides she doesn't want to read Cherry, or she doesn't want to sing Cherry Ripe. She doesn't like it. It doesn't do anything for her. So instead, she performs the Lobster Quadrille song, taught to her by the Mock Turtle, played by Gene Wilder. And initially, all of the guests at this party are sort of like, what's going on right now? What is this song that you're doing? Why are you singing this? But then Alice really sort of gets into it. She starts doing a little dance, and they're all like, "Oh, fucking, this is an amazing song. So rewarding. I am absolutely thrilled and not at all weirded out that you're singing a song about sea creatures dancing." So again, it sort of turns out all right in the end. Alice's performing ability has been vindicated. But I want to come back to that idea of the party and the guests, because this is actually one of the other interesting things. I should have said there's 3 interesting things about this movie. This film very much sets up Wonderland as a dream. Whereas that's not always the case, right? Even in the novels, as far as I remember, in Lewis Carroll's novels, it's not entirely clear what exactly the sort of ontological status of Wonderland is. Whether this is a real place that she's actually gone to, whether this is a dream, whether this is psychotic break, whether this is she ate some bad bread or whatever and she's tripping out. We don't really know, as far as I remember. Fact check me on that if I'm wrong. But I don't think that Carroll makes the sort of existential or ontological status of Wonderland clear. In this film, it's mostly much more evident that this is a dream. There's a little bit of a sort of Wizard of Oz shtick here, where the guests at the party are all... The guests at the party become the characters in Wonderland, right? So the caterpillar is a major who's there at the party smoking a pipe with a long stem, and he becomes the hookah-smoking caterpillar. Martin Short is there with a sort of straw top hat and a pocket watch, and he becomes the Mad Hatter. The Queen of Hearts, the King of Hearts, the Jack of Hearts, they're all there doing stuff. So again, there's this very much this sense of like at the end of Wizard of Oz, where it's oh, I had such a strange dream, and you were there, and you were there, and you were there. And so the fact that we have Alice sort of running off, she goes into this sort of clearing back behind her house, and then crazy shit starts happening, very much sets this up as a dream sequence, right? That her unconscious mind has processed all of these people that she saw in this garden party, filtered that through her anxiety about singing and her childlike imagination to sort of amplify their characteristics in order to sort of come to understand what's going on. The only thing, and in fact, at the end of the film, when she transitions out of Wonderland back into the real world, we do see her wake up. And so there is very much the impression that all of this has just been a dream. And if that was all there was to it, it would be remarkably disappointing. Right? Because a dream sequence is some bullshit. Let's all just agree on that. If you have the entire plot of a movie or a TV episode or a play or a novel or a short story or whatever it is, and we're invested in what's happening, and then at the end you're like, oh, JK, it was a dream sequence, none of that really happened or mattered at all. You've insulted us. You've just insulted us. It is a bad move. Do not do it as a storyteller. But Willing doesn't quite leave it there. Or this film doesn't quite leave it there, because we see Alice wake up, she goes back, she sings the Lobster Quadrille, all of the people from Wonderland are there, back in their natural forms, but on one of the chairs between some of the guests, Alice sees the Cheshire Cat, played by Whoopi Goldberg. The Cheshire Cat, obviously very much a Wonderland creature. We do have Alice's cat, Dinah, in sort of the opening sequence, but this isn't Dinah. This is the Cheshire Cat, very distinctly. And so it, again, sort of throws into doubt the ontological status, both of Wonderland and of the real world, right? Because if the Cheshire Cat, a Wonderland creature, can enter the real world, then how do we know what the difference might be? I think that's a really interesting way to sort of wrap this film up, is to give us this notion that we know what happened, that this was a dream sequence straight out. We don't need to worry about it. But here's the twist. I think it's a very cool ending.